Hello, good morning, everybody. Are you ready for our webinar today? This is the third of a series of webinars presented by TESOL IES. And today, we are very happy that we are presenting a Latin American speaker, Vicky Saumell. Vicky is a teacher, trainer, materials writer, and presenter. She currently teaches at a bilingual primary school in Buenos Aires. She is also a freelancer author and has worked as a writer and trainer for Pearson, CUP, Macmillan, and Santillana. She is a committee member for ITEFL Learning Technologies SIG and the Publications Committee. She has a professional website at www.vickysaumell.com. And Vicky is today presenting ways of promoting creativity in the classroom. This lesson will explore the current issues regarding creativity in education, especially for teaching and learning a language. What is creativity? Who can be considered creative? What are the barriers to creativity? Is a creative teacher enough to promote creativity in students? How can we create the right atmosphere for creativity to arise? We will discuss these issues and will then share my experience of different tips and strategies for promoting creativity in the classroom. Vicky will share a variety of tasks that will include personalization, literature responses, and creativity language practice by showing examples of her own students' work, many of which integrate technology meaningfully. And TESOL IES is very proud and honored to have Vicky Saumell today in our program. Thank you, Vicky, for accepting our invitation. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mary. Well, I'm truly honored to be here today, and I hope wherever you are in the world, you are willing to share and to see some of my experiences regarding creativity in the ELT classroom. So let's get started. Here we are. Almost ready. Okay. All right. So first of all, I want to guide you through what we are going to do today, because, this is a very important topic, and there's no way I can share everything I've done with it in such a short time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to explore some initial questions that I asked myself when I started trying to promote creativity in my own classroom. And then I'm going to share 5 ways I found of promoting creativity in the classroom. And I'm going to accompany each of these ways with examples, most of which make use of technology and apps and tools, because creativity and learning technologies are 2 of my passions. So it's quite impossible to separate them. So I hope you enjoy the session, and at the end we'll have time for questions. So if you have questions, go write them down and we'll be ready at the end. All right, so let's get started. Everything I'm going to share today is from my own experience in the classroom as a teacher. And I think this is important. I've done these things with my students, and I will be sharing what my students have produced in projects that promote creativity. Some of my initial questions and concerns were, what are people's concerns about creativity? And mostly what I got from people is that people say, well, I am not creative, you are born creative, or I don't have time to do this in the classroom because I have too much to teach. So what is creativity and who can be creative? I believe that everybody can be creative. I believe that a creative teacher does not necessarily mean that you have creative students. So I think we need to separate both. You can be a creative teacher, but then not do things in your classroom that promote creativity in your students. Today, I'm going to focus specifically on promoting creativity in our students. And so we need to analyze what can help creativity to flow and what can hinder creativity. So what do we need to do in a classroom so that there's the right atmosphere for creativity to arise? So some posts, some nice visuals I found about creativity and are quite interesting to trigger some of the ideas I want to share with you are the ones that you can see here. The one in the middle says that creativity is the opposite of routine, and I deeply believe that. So routine tasks will probably not help creativity to arise and to flow. That does not mean that you don't have to have a routine in the classroom, especially if you're working with young learners. Routines are very important to give structure to the class and to lower students' anxiety. But you need to mix these routine moments or this routine structure with creative tasks so that we can have this creativity in the classroom. Another thing that is really important is that to live a creative life, we must lose fear of being wrong. And this is because creativity is about experimenting and it's about playing with the language. And if we are afraid of making mistakes, or if we as teachers, uh, um, you know, make faces when our students make mistakes, and we create this atmosphere that being wrong is not good, it's very difficult that creative activities will take off in our classrooms. So we need to have a more positive perspective about making mistakes. And if you have a look at the poster on the left, there are lots of things there that are interesting. It's inventing, experimenting, growing, taking risks, breaking rules, making mistakes, and having fun. So anything that you do in your classroom as a teacher that promotes these actions from students will help to create the right atmosphere for creativity to arise. So, in a nutshell, if we think about typical tasks we do in a classroom, close-ended tasks, which only have one possible response, are not going to promote a lot of creativity in our students. I'm not saying that there's not a place for those tasks in the classroom. What I say is that if our objective is to promote creativity, then a closed-ended task is not going to get there. So if the objective is to promote creativity, then we need to think of more open-ended tasks with multiple responses, with the possibility of students experimented to in order to get through the task. So let's start with our 5 ways of 5 ways of promoting creativity. I have identified these 5 ways that have worked in my classroom. So let's get to the first one. The first one is very important. And as I said before, it's open-ended tasks, but also the possibility of students to choose what they want to do. And when I say this, some teachers imagine that that means going into a classroom and asking students, hey guys, what do you want to do today? And that's definitely not what I'm talking about. That would be absolute chaos. What I'm talking about is choice as a planned strategy within a lesson. So what does that mean? It means that you have your main learning objective clear. And then you can come up with different ways of achieving this objective. There's not just one way of getting there. And so these different ways of getting there to achieve this objective are different choices that the students can have. And so, for example, if you are teaching a genre like writing an email, of course, writing an article or writing an encyclopedia article or writing other type of text is not up for choice because that is your main objective, writing an email. But maybe the topic of the email or the tool you're going to use to draft the email or any other thing that can be up for choice can be planned in your lesson so that your students have choice at the moment of carrying out the task. Okay? So for me, this is really important. Whenever students are allowed to choose, there is much more personal involvement with the tasks. They take responsibility for what they are doing because they have chosen it. You are working on student agency. They have a say in what they're doing. So these are different things that are really positive in the classroom. Okay, let's get to number 2. The second way of promoting creativity, in my opinion, has to do with allowing students to be exposed to different types of language. And what do I mean with this? Usually when I look at course books, the types of texts that I can find are informative texts in the form of a piece of news or an article from an encyclopedia, or maybe a story, a short story, or an extract from a longer story. And there's maybe an ad, an advertisement, but then usually there's not much more than that. And I really think that students need to be exposed to all types of language and how language is used in order to become more motivated to then use the language in more creative ways. For example, one such way could be exposing students to memes these days. But another thing that I'm really fond of is poetry. And I love to expose my students to poetry. But whenever I ask them about poetry and what they think about it, the usual response is, again, I'm talking about young learners and teens in general. The responses are, 1, poetry is boring. 2, poetry is about love, and then boys might be a little turned off by this. Another response is poetry is for adults. And so what I think is that the problem is not poetry, that the problem is the poetry that these kids, these students have been exposed to. Probably they haven't been exposed to the right kind of poetry for them, the right kind of poetry for this audience. So I think we need to find the right kind of poetry. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples. The first is this poem is called Who Are We? And it's written by Benjamin Zephaniah. He is a British poem, a British poet with Jamaican heritage. And Benjamin Zephaniah writes lovely poems addressed to young people on a variety of topics that are seldom loved. So this one is about identity. And he writes a lot of poems about animals and about taking care of the planet. So I think these are very current issues. And I think that when we find poems that deal with these issues, the receptiveness of these poems by these younger ages is higher. So that's just one idea. Benjamin Zephaniah has a lot of poetry books. This one is really, really good. It's called Wicked World. Another favorite of mine when it comes to poems, though it may not be everybody's cup of tea, is Tim Burton's poetry book called The Melancholy Death of Oyster Boy. And maybe you didn't know that Tim Burton wrote poems, but if you are familiar with Tim Burton's cinematic works, his poems are very much like that. So they are kind of creepy and weird and fun. So if you have the possibility of having a look at this book, it has very, very interesting poems. Due to copyright, I'm not going to show you the poems, but I've worked with them. They're really good. And some of them even have connections to videos on YouTube created by himself. So you can link different media like poems and videos and then relate the characters. So there are lots of things that you could do with it. Another thing, another type of poetry, if you want to call it, is what are called shape poems. And this is just an example. This is a book called Word Wheels and Other Shape Poems. And this is some pages from the book just to illustrate what you mean. And if you have a look, it's the concept that's catchy and the language is not that difficult. So you could be having students writing animal poems resembling the shapes, like this spider poem, or others like The Letter That Was Never Sent, or creating words using shapes to clarify the meaning of the word. So the shape helps clarify the meaning, like the first picture. So as I said, exposing students to language being used in more creative ways other than informative texts or traditional stories is a way of helping them find what they need to be able to start playing with the language themselves and using the language in a more creative way. So that was number 2, exposing students to different types of language. Number 3, and one of my favorites, is allowing students to explore literature in different ways. So whenever I do literature, it's not just enough to do comprehension checks, comprehension questions, and language work on what they're reading, but also promoting tasks that allow students to do more creative work on what they have read. So I usually create or either a choice board or a list of tasks for a certain work we have read. This is an example. And they can choose what they want to do after we have finished reading. And this is the way I have already done the language work. I have already done the comprehension. And now I am giving way to a more creative expression from the part of the students on what they have read, on what they have understood of what they have read. This is a picture of my students' work related to that previous choice board of activities for A Midsummer Night's Dream. And on the left, there's a Venn diagram comparing 3 versions of the same story: a narrative version, a comic strip, and the play. And so this student chose to compare the language used, the characters, the events in the 3 versions, and created this Venn diagram. This was done on paper, but this could be easily done online using a Venn diagram online tool. On the right, you can see a group of students of mine who decided to create the stage setting for all of the scenes in the play. And of course, they had to explain. So they did a lot of craft work, but they also, since the focus of our class is linguistic, they had to explain why they had chosen that and what materials that they had used. So they had to justify all their choices. Of course, other students created more technological products. I'm just going to show you a little bit of a video created by a girl using a tool called Zimmer Twins that can create animations. So she chose a particular part of the story, and she recreated the story using Zimmer Twins. Let's have a look. Okay, so a few things about this particular project. If you're familiar with Zimmer Twins, you will have noticed a few things. If you are not, I'm going to walk you through them. Zimmer Twins allows you to create these animations, but it only has 3 possible characters: the boy, the girl, and the cat. The cat is called 13. So even if you can do anything you want with these 3 characters, it's still these 3 characters that are only possible in Zimmer Twins. So this girl came to me, and if you are familiar with the Midsummer Night's Dream, there is no cat, but there is a fairy, the Spuck the fairy. So this girl came to me and said, do you mind if I use Zimmer Twins and I make the cat be Puck the fairy? And I thought that was a very interesting solution for the problem. So that was the first thing. The second thing is that Zimmer Twin does not allow for voiceover narration. So this girl created the animation. The animation came with all the text you can see and with the background music. What she then did, because this was done many years ago, she filmed the animation on the computer using her camera. So she filmed the animation, and then she used that video. She uploaded that to Movie Maker at the time, and she recorded the voiceover narration. So she did a mashup of apps. She did app smashing without even asking me. So there are 2 things going on here. First, the creative use of language to build this written text and the voiceover narration that's not exactly the same as what you're reading. The second is sorting out the problems related to having those characters and seeing how to sort that out. And the other is finding a way to do the voiceover narration. So this student in particular was very creative in the way she used the language, but also in which she solved the task. So another thing you can do when students read something is, and this is copied from the concept of the movie trailer, is to create a book trailer using a video editor, any video editor on a mobile phone or on a computer. There are really good editors now for mobile phones, WeVideo, and many others. So essentially, students create a book trailer. They need to understand that they cannot tell the end, and the objective of the book trailer is to convince other readers to read this book. The same as in a movie trailer, the objective is to convince viewers to go to the cinema and watch this film, for example. So I'm going to show you a little bit of a book trailer created by a student. Okay, so this is just to show you how they build that. I don't know if you're familiar with the Diaries of Adam and Eve by Mark Twain. So it's a very interesting story written from the perspective of Adam and from the perspective of Eve. And it's quite interesting to see what each of them thinks of the same situation. So this girl found this video clip of a perfume. So which is what you see, the girl and the boy, and she repurposed that clip, added the false at the beginning, and created a script text to go with the images, and of course relating that to the book. Some students also choose to do voiceover apart from writing the script, which is even better. So you have text, but you also have voiceover. And the combination of the images and the text and the voiceover and the music is a really interesting project. And it's linguistically interesting because they have to decide what they need to put in to create an effective book trailer in this case. So, okay, I need to move to the next. Okay, I told you how much I love poetry. And a few years ago, I discovered this concept of hidden poetry or blacked out poetry. And you may have seen it. You can use any text. It can even be a piece of a newspaper page or a text from your textbook or an article from an encyclopedia. In this case, they are songs, but it can be any text. The original, the source is any text. And then what you do is you find words to create a new message that is hidden in this original article, text, song, whatever. And you find a way of signaling the path to show this new message. Some people do it by blacking out all the other words so that you can only see the chosen words. But this is another way of doing it, like signaling the words you choose and creating a new message. And in this particular case, my students and I had been working on a project related to the Beatles. So what I told them is, choose your favorite song by the Beatles and bring it to class. And they didn't know what they were going to do with it. They just chose the song and brought the lyrics to class. And so I showed them a few examples of hidden poetry. And I explained that they were going to do the same with the song they had chosen. And these are two examples, and I'm going to show you another one later. So they created this new message using the song. One of the things, if you want to do this kind of activity, it's really creative, but you need to warn students that they cannot use more than 3 words together in a string, because if they use a whole phrase or sentence, then it's very difficult to break from the original meaning of the text they are using. And what we want to do is we want to create a new message that's not copied from the original text. So they can only use 3 words at a time. If you can see, they're not more than 3 words together. And still, when you read the message, it's really interesting. So you have a look at the first. It says, places have changed and had their moments. These memories are dead. I think I'll never stop in my life. I'll never lose people I love. And so using the words from the song, they have created a new message and they have beautified it to make it look like this. But then I went even further and I wanted to create a digital artifact from this. So this is what I did. I used avatar creating tools like Buddy Poke or my free talking avatar, my talking avatar free. And in the second example, I use green screen technology. So let me show you both and I'll explain how we did it. Here, we created the avatar, and then behind the avatar, you can choose what background you want. So in this particular case, the background was the text. So we took a photo of the text and used that photograph as the background. And so when you play the video, you can see the avatar reading the poem. So you have the creative activity of writing the new message, creating the lovely looking poem, but also the possibility of performing the reading of the poem, and then creating this digital artifact that can be easily shared with the community. In the second example, using a green screen, I filmed the student reading the poem. And then I added the background. I changed the green screen and added the background. So this is how it looks. So essentially, the difference is if you are working with students and you have authorization to film them, you can use the green screen technology. If you're working with students who are younger and it's difficult to get authorization to film them, then you can create the speaking avatars. And so the only thing you have is their voice, but you don't have their image. And that makes it easier to share online, okay? We need to be very aware of these issues when we want to share our students' work online. This is another example of speaking avatars. In this case, instead of hidden poetry, they wrote haikus and cinquains. So let me show you their products. And this is another one. So here we had two issues. The first was to become familiar with the structure of these poems, which are not very difficult. The second stage was creating the poems, which really wasn't that difficult. All the students managed to create their own poems. The third step was creating the lovely artsy way of displaying the poem. So using drawings to beautify the poem they had written. And then we turned it, they created their avatars and they read the poem aloud. So they have a digital performance of the poems. Okay, so we went through three ways. Choice, different types of language, and exploring literature. Now I'm going to get through the two last ways of promoting creativity. The first is allowing students to express themselves and to express who they are in different ways. And this is really important because sometimes we go through the motions in our class and we rarely get to know our students very deeply. And we rarely create opportunities for them to tell us, show us, and express who they really are. And sometimes, and most of the time, they have beautiful things to show us. So I'm going to show you a couple of activities to be able to do that. The first is very simple. Use a word art tool like Wordle or ABC Word Cloud to create personal introduction, personal clouds. So if you see in the first one, you have a name and then you have a lot of words related to that person. So this is what I asked them to do. Make a list of words that they would use to describe themselves, also things they like, maybe names of family members or pets, and then create a word cloud using those words. And then, of course, we would use that word cloud in many different ways. One possibility is to ask students to come to the front of the class and introduce themselves. You can also do that in groups, and then students can ask each other questions based on the words written in the word cloud. And if the students already know each other because they have been in the same class for some time, what you can do is ask them not to include the name in the word cloud, and then post the different word clouds on the class walls, and they have to go around and try to guess who each word cloud belongs to. They can also go around and ask questions. So a very simple way of doing a getting to know you activity to allow students to share information about themselves that they are comfortable with. Because sometimes they come and tell me, do I have to say I'm fat, or do I have to say this or that? And I say, no, you don't have to do anything. You have to share information you are happy with sharing. Anything you want to share about you is fine. And so others go quite shallow and are very shy and don't want to share a lot. And others go very deeply into their own personalities and share lots of things. So this is very interesting to get to know. Also for you as a teacher to get to know your students. So another thing I usually do to promote self-expression is free creative writing, okay? And for free creative writing online, I use this website called Piclits. And Piclits provides different images, and then you choose the image and you have a text box below where you can type, and whatever you type appears on top of is superimposed on the image, and you get things like this. I'm just going to show you a couple so that you see the variety of responses from students from the same class. So we're talking about boys and girls the same age, about 15 years old, and these are some of the products they created. So something nature and storms, and then we go into war, which is, I come from Argentina. My 15, 16-year-olds have had no contact with war. So it's interesting to find that war is in their minds. Okay, I think it tells us a lot. And then, of course, there are girls who or students who wrote more romantic poems or existential poems like this, or something like this, which is, instead of a whole text, is a set of sentences that are kind of a manifesto for life. So I think it's a very interesting way of just allowing students to express themselves and work and use their language freely and more creatively. So this is Piclits. Okay, let's go to the last way, because I think I have only 5 minutes left. The last is to allow them to become somebody else. We said it's great to allow them to express themselves, but I also believe that they are themselves 24 hours a day. And some of them have very hard lives, and it's hard to be themselves 24 hours a day. So we could give them kind of an escape if we can allow them to become somebody else at times. So let's have a look at some ideas. This is a project I call Once Upon a Time, and it's not related to fairy tales. It's related to choosing who you want to be in a different time and in a different place, and then writing kind of a journal about a day in your life being that person at that time. So I'm going to show you some examples. You can use the tool is not important here. You can use any digital tool to create a poster or a journal or a magazine. Yes. The important thing is the content and who these students have chosen to be. In this case, a girl chose to be a witness of the Twin Towers terrorist attack. Yes. And she told where she was that day and what she saw and how she felt. It's quite interesting and shocking. This other girl wanted to be a member of the Incas community. And so we talked about the different roles in the Inca community, and she chose to be a farmer. So she wrote about being a farmer in the Incas community. This girl wanted to be Marie Antoinette, and she wanted to be Marie Antoinette the day she was beheaded. So I told her, well, it's very difficult to write about your day if you are dead. So maybe you need to choose another day. And so she still was Marie Antoinette on a different day. And she wrote about being how she dressed up and where she lived and the palace and the servants and being surrounded by servants all the time. And it was quite an interesting account of her life. This girl also wanted to be Marilyn Monroe. I don't know why teens are obsessed with death. She wanted to be Marilyn Monroe the day she died, too. So I told her, well, that's not very appropriate. So she chose to be Marilyn Monroe's best friend that day, the day she found out she had died. So she wrote an account of where she was, what she was doing, etc. When she learned about her best friend's death. And this boy, who's very fond of painting and drawing and writing, he chose to be Leonardo da Vinci at the time, around the time he was painting the Mona Lisa. So he wrote an account of what he was doing that day and what were his troubles, etc. And then he this was not digital, as you can see. This is a Word document, but he chose to use that tool, and I think that was very valid. So he just wrote it, his text on Word, but he chose a font to show that it was kind of a journal, and then he printed it and he aged it. So you see that the corners of the paper are darker, and he also made some little drawings on the edges to show his passion for drawing. So I think it was a very thorough understanding of the task at hand and very creative. Okay, 2 more tasks. Creating character point of views using avatar creators. In this case, this is Blabberize, but you can use mobile apps like Chatterpix, for example. I'm going to show you only one because we don't have much time, but so you can see what the students did. The students had read the myth of the Minotaur, and so I pre-selected images for each of the characters. So what they did is choose the character, upload to the app they were going to use, draw the mouth, and make them speak. Okay, let's have a look at one. Okay, I'll show you just one more. Okay, so this particular case is 9-year-old kids from my school, 9-year-olds doing this task on the spot. They did not prepare for it. They did not prepare their text. They just came to class. I said, choose a character. What would they say? And they just recorded it. So this was done in a 45 minutes class. Okay, very quick, but very creative and fun for them. And again, for young learners, it's something that you can share with the communities because there's no picture of the kids. It's just the voices. Okay, this is really important. All right. Now, the last task I want to show is the use of green screen technology to create creative digital products. And so in this case, my 7th form students are 12-year-olds. They had read a story called The Jester Has Lost His Jingle. And what they did is rewrite that story with a slightly different focus, a different story with kind of the same message. So what we have is the different parts that they created. They created the text first, then they created drawings to be the backgrounds of each part of the story. And then we recorded them on a green screen performing the story. Okay, let's have a very short look at this. Okay, so you can see, sorry, let me go back. You can see the story they wrote, the drawings they made, and the recording on the green screen. And then I created a little title for their video, yes? So now when you put all that together, this is what you're going to see next. This is the product. Using an app like Doink Green Screen or KineMaster, you can create this. Okay, so you can see how the different parts come together when you edit. And really, it's not difficult to use the green screen app. You just need any green screen piece of cloth, you hang it, you record your students against it, and then using an app that is free, you can change the background and create things like this that are very creative. I'm going to show you one more. In this case, this is what I did. I have a stuffed toy representing the Gruffalo. The Gruffalo is a children's story. So I took a picture of my Gruffalo on the green screen. And then using Chatterpix, I made him speak. I drew the mouth. Okay, so I made him speak. So now I had the picture on the green screen. Now I have the picture that speaks. Then I chose a background, a nice forest background to put my character in. And now we're going to go and see the finished product. So this is very simple because you don't need a big green screen. With a small piece of cloth on a chair, students can take pictures of the stuffed toys or and then create the speaking character and then superimpose it on a different background to create very, very nice stories. Okay, so wow, I've been rushing through. This is a list of all the tools I have shown, from the word clouds to the storybooks, to the posters, the videos, the avatars, and the green screen apps. I can go back to that if you need. And I want to be able to answer some questions that you may have. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Vicky. I mean, a beautiful presentation with a lot of examples. Viewers are enjoying your presentation. They have many comments and questions that I'm going to read just now. I have, for example, when you were talking about the poem, Monica Spack, she said, I love the hidden poem idea. Then Grazia Maria Mendoza says this is an important skill. It promotes creativity and also critical thinking as well as analysis. Stefania Ballotto says, yes, creativity, innovation, and digital skills. Great. Thanks, Vicky. And then Grazia Maria Mendoza says, I can visualize how this increases the level of confidence for learners. And she has two questions here. She makes more comments, but she has two questions. One of them is, what have been the challenges you have encountered, and how have you overcome them?
Okay. One of the challenges is related to the initial questions I asked. Remember when I said, maybe you think you're not creative. That also happens to students. You present the task and they say, I'm not a writer. I can't write a poem. I'm not creative. I can't do this. So again, as I say, it has to do with how you create the right atmosphere in class and how you prepare. You know that students are ready for that task when you present it, uh, that they have the language to use, and that maybe they have dictionaries, it doesn't matter, and that they can make mistakes and they can ask you and they can rephrase. So mainly many students at the beginning think they cannot cope with tasks like this, and the truth is that these are compulsory tasks, even though some parts can be up for choice. They have to do the tasks, and I always get 100% response from students. So even students who believe they can't do it, they do it in the end and they feel so happy about it. I think that's the main challenge.
Okay, thank you. There is another question from Grazia, and she says, what are specific consideration teachers should take into account when preparing lessons this way?
Okay, so what I think is, you cannot do this just because you like green screen, for example. I like green screen, let's do a green screen thing. It has to be tied to your objectives, and your objectives are mapped out in your lesson plans and in your curriculum. So I think it needs careful planning. And so once your main objectives are clear, you can start thinking, what tasks can help me achieve that objective? What can I do that is slightly more creative than the traditional way of practicing this? And also in my case, because I love learning technologies, is there any type of technology that can help me do that more effectively or more creatively? And so when all these factors clash, then you have the right task.
Okay, thank you. Grazia made a comment while you were giving the presentation, and she says, great, I have used book for creative writing and students can create their own stories. Olenka confirms that as well. And Stefania Balotto says, some questions I had have been answered, and Vicky is proceeding. So while you were giving your presentations, I mean, you answered the doubts that were arising. And then Grazia made a comment while in your presentation, and she said, wonderful activity. It truly promotes problem solving, and bringing it to their context allows learners to have ideas that contribute to the well-being of their communities. And Grazia also says, I truly like the avatar idea. Olenka Villavicencio says, congrats Vicky, Saumell, really great activities to practice and share with our students and colleagues. And finally, Estefania Balotto says, thank you, Vicky, wonderful. Grazia Maria Mendoza adds, great talk, Vicky, incredible, as always. Yes, I would say, as always, Vicky is a great presenter. That's why she was chosen to be here with us in one of these webinars of the TESOL Call IS. And I don't know, I think we don't have more comments here. But I'm very happy, Vicky, that I had you here. I mean, I knew that it was going to be great, and people were going to be very interested on that. Those who were not in this webinar will have the chance to see the webinar in 5 minutes. I will post the link, but if you go into the channel, into the TESOL Call IS channel, you will see this video in around 5 minutes, 10 minutes maximum.
Lovely.
Would you like to say anything, Vicky?
Yeah, just one thing. the reason why I think I'm able to answer those questions and that I addressed all the questions you had while you were watching is because I'm a teacher and I have been doing this in the classroom, and it's the same questions I have been asking myself along the way. So I think that's what you need. You need to be a teacher, you need to be aware of what your students need, and you need to keep asking questions and finding the most effective ways of solving that. Okay, I'm so happy I could be here with you today. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, TESOL Co-IS.
Okay, thank you very much. Very happy to have you here. And as I said, I mean, stay tuned. There is a next webinar coming with a very interesting person, also a great speaker as Vicky is. And well, we invite you to have, I mean, to be with us and to invite other people from your country or other countries around the world to come and see these free webinars, which is for the call community and the rest of the teaching community in the world. So thank you very much. Very proud to have you here, Vicky. And see you soon with a new webinar. Stay tuned. See you. Have a very good Sunday.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.